All right, so it's time to talk about an album that I have been addicted to. I have not been able to stop listening to this album. I listen to it a lot during the summertime as kind of a feel good vibes type of an album. And I realized I still haven't done a full length album review for it. I kept meaning to do a quarter notes and include it in there, but I just never really felt like I was done with the album. So I figured let's do this. Let's dive in and put this boy to bed and talk about it. So here we are. Madness and Magic by Arabs in Aspic. So Arabs in Aspect is a Norwegian heavy prog band, but really they're a retro prog. They utilize a lot of the techniques from yesteryear into the music now. They are very similar to a lot of their contemporaries of like Birds and Buildings and all their projects. I'm getting a lot of like the Wobblers and Carfagan, and like, I hate to say it, but I almost feel as though this style of progressive rock music is almost like bargain bin progressive rock music. And I hate to put that label on it, but every other progressive rock band that I'm hearing these days sound very, very similar to this. Now, what made me come back for more was the hooks, the grooves, the feels that I have on it. Like, these guys formed in, as I mentioned, Norway in 1997, and this is their sixth studio album. So their first one came out in 2004, and they've been putting out albums pretty regularly from 2010. So we had Strange Frame of Mind in 2010, Pictures in a Dream in 2013, Victim of Your Father's Agony in 2015, and Snidness Magi in 2017. So now we come to Madness and Magic. And the overall flavor that I have with this style of music is it is definitely got roots in that symphonic prog of yesteryear. You have a lot of that very synth and mellotron and Moog led instrumentations, guitars that kind of fill up the cracks, and there's a lot of interplays within their vocals on this one, and that's one of the things that I really, really like about this is the harmonization that both Johnstein, Stig, and Eric have, because the three of them kind of trade off on their vocals, and you can almost interchange each one as the lead singer. So I really appreciate that aspect of their harmonizations, especially when they come into the main choruses of a lot of these tracks. Really breathes a really fun aspect to the music that I feel like gives them a leg up of a lot of their contemporaries. Along the same vein, though, I do feel a lot of their influences from the past, specifically on Heaven in Your Eyes and High Tech Parent. Heaven in Your Eyes being the last track, the longest of about 16, almost 17 minutes. I'm getting a lot of flavors of an Anthony Phillips, specifically with some of his solo works, like we're looking at Private Pieces and The Goose and the Ghost. Those kind of minstrel medieval feels about it. Even within a lot of the smaller moments on this album, it feels very early Genesis within the Trespass that Anthony was on, in terms of building up the atmosphere and building up the overall presentation of a track. I really, really do enjoy how I Vow to Thee, My Screen is the opening track on here. And I also like how there's a little bit of a darkness that's kind of threaded through these tracks. And that's something that is pretty apparent within this style of progressive rock. There is an undertone of darkness, a little bit of menacing, waiting beyond the wings, kind of hiding in the nooks and crannies within the shadows. And I enjoy that. You know, I think that's a really interesting outlook. I don't know if it's overdone yet, but I can see maybe in a couple more years, if I were to listen to this again, I might be a little tired. I do also really like the overall kind of concept of this album in kind of marrying the traditional approaches with a technological mindset. Like even the title of the first track off of here, I Vow to Thee, My Screen, of always being on a screen of some kind, whether it be your smartphone, your tablet, or your computer screen, there's always something there. And this is even found within Lullaby for Modern Kids, parts 1 and 2. You need to look no further than the High Tech Parent in having to kind of adapt themselves to a ever-changing landscape to help connect with their children. I like how they've kind of blended this without being overly preachy, without completely saying screens are bad, you never want to look at technology again, we need to go back to old sticks and stones when we didn't even have batteries. Like, I'm glad they didn't take that approach, because it is a very slippery slope, especially for those individuals who have been around the block for so long, and they tend to lean on that, and anything new is scary and we don't want it. So I'm glad that they didn't fall too heavily on that. I also really enjoy the actual structure of this album too. The first 4 tracks of, as I mentioned, the first track, Lullaby for Modern Children, or Modern Kids, parts 1 and 2, and High Tech Parents, these 4 tracks blend seamlessly, creating about 24 minutes worth of solid music. That's seamless, there's no real break in the music. It goes from one track to the other, passing the baton very beautifully. And I really enjoy that style of music when it's executed very well. It doesn't just feel like 4 tracks that they forgot to chop up, and it doesn't feel like these 4 tracks have nothing in common with one another. It's much more of a mosaic of colors changing from one shade to another. And I really appreciate that, and I really like that. You can definitely tell when one shade is no longer green and starts becoming blue, but there is a little bit of a blurring of the lines, and if you're not actually looking at the runtime, you would miss where that baton has been passed. I also really enjoy that the second half of this album, starting with the title track of Madness and Magic and going into Heaven in Your Eyes, has a very clear and distinct start and stop. So these 2 tracks do not blend into one another. They don't play well with one another. And I actually enjoy that, because Madness and Magic, being one of the smaller tracks at almost 7 minutes, I feel does a really good job of being the album single, of showing us what's needed and what can be found within this album. So if the band wanted to shop this song around as a single, they have a clear-cut single that they can use without having to cut up any other big epic that's found on this album. And I really like Madness and Magic. I really like how this ebbs and flows, and it's a little bit more of a poppy approach. It's a little bit more accessible. So if they want people to come in from the fringes, they have that in for this band. But still, my favorite track is Heaven in Your Eyes, the 16-minute. I really love the ebb and flow. I love how it opens up very poppy, very fun. I love the overall, chorus work that we have on this. I think it's really catchy. It's really grooving. I can sing along to it and really have some fun with it. But I also love how dark it gets when we get into that more guitar lick aspect of it. It's a little bit more grating. It's a little bit more raw in approach. It's not just this high polished, finished object. I really feel like it's the boys in a recording studio jamming around and seeing what works and what doesn't. There's almost like a experimentation and a discovery happening at the same time of recording. The only drawback to this is the song is a little bit of a mess on the first couple of listens to, and even the ending isn't all that well received for me. It does feel much more of a trip rather than a land. And I do wish that it ended on a little bit more of a stay power, like a little bit more of a finalized punctuation mark. But other than that, I really found myself enjoying this album. I found myself coming back to it a lot. We've had a lot of this style of music within this year, and this one has risen pretty high to the top in terms of that progressive rock, retro prog, symphonic prog, heavy prog. I always just use the banner of retro prog because that's really what it feels like to me. It's probably one of my favorites of this year in terms of that style, because we haven't had a whole lot of really standout retro prog, in my opinion, for this year. But this one's one that I really enjoyed. I would highly recommend checking it out. It's a download. I would go out, I would download this, I would have it in my computer, because this is one that I would revisit when I'm looking for that kind of good vibes, that really good feels, because I've got a handful of those, and I like coming back to those as just like a nice warm hug. I know what I'm expecting, I'm not getting surprised, I know exactly what I'm getting into. I mean, all I needed to do was see the front cover, see the listing of the tracks and how long they were. I knew exactly what I was getting into for this album, and I wasn't disappointed. So I would recommend it. I would check it out. So that's about it for Madness and Magic from Arabs and Aspic. What did you guys think? It's been out for quite a while. I think it's been out since June, so a little late on the uphill, but better late than never. So it's been out for a while, so what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.
coming to get ya.
Tucked in with headshots. Ooh, you're in trouble, kid. Death walks behind you.
He's coming to